Hi, I'm Donna Ray.
And I'm Al Wadley.
Welcome to our podcast, Feldenkrais for Life.
In each episode, we will discuss ideas and experiences pertaining to the Feldenkrais method.
You're going to learn skills that will move pain to comfort, anxiety to ease, and we'll explore learning and how to spark creativity.
To learn more about Donna, visit her site at donnaray.com.
To find Al Wadley, go to achievingexcellence.com. Hi, Al.
Hey, Donna. How are you today?
I feel refreshed this morning. How about you?
Yeah, I feel good. I've been up early and doing my morning routine, and now here talking with you, and I feel pretty good.
Terrific. Well, let's talk about limit setting and pushing beyond, finding comfort zone and building on comfort zone, expanding that comfort zone. It's a very important topic in the Feldenkrais method.
It is. Yeah. Dr. Feldenkrais, in many of his lessons, would say, do not go to the border. Do not go to the border, doing a movement. And what he meant by that is to not push or stretch or strain at the border and to work within your range of comfort. So that's a very important aspect of his lessons and cultivating a state of learning.
That's right. And he often started a lesson by having people say, look to the right, turn to the right and come back to the middle, saying, don't go beyond the border, don't stretch. And then he would introduce a variety of movements that would include everything below, for example, the head turning, so that in the process of turning and seeing to the right and back to the middle, you would go beyond what you found the border to be at the beginning of the movements.
That's right. And that's like one of the most amazing things about this work is working in that way and not pushing beyond the border, then doing variations that are more integrated. And then going back to that border, you find that it's expanded out. The range of motion has increased without stretching, without efforting, without pushing. It's an amazing thing that these lessons utilize the profound wisdom of neuroplasticity in the brain to be able to learn to do that. It's just genius.
That really is genius. And sometimes it's hard for people to believe. So they test it and they do stretch and they go beyond and they feel some discomfort. And one of the questions people pose when they're beginners of the Feldenkrais method and doing awareness through movement, our guided lessons, is why does my neck hurt now? And we then review what it means to begin a movement, to do a smaller movement. And sometimes people habitually make a very large movement and they think it's a small movement. So developing self-awareness and awareness through movement is so important. And it applies to the movements in the Feldenkrais method, but it actually applies to life in almost every way, I think. I can't think of a situation that is outside this question of what is good for me and how much should I do?
Yes, I completely agree with that. And there's other interesting situations in Feldenkrais lessons. So the kind of lessons we're talking about are really the ones that are more common. There are more uncommon lessons where they're more challenging. I did a lesson the other day, and it was on my stomach, and Feldenkrais, had us go into this really extreme position and stay in that position and do a movement with another part of ourselves. So I was on my stomach, I was lifted up on my arms, an extreme extension. And he says, now come up on your toes and lift and lower your pelvis. So I was going right up to the border, staying right at the border. And then he had us do this other variation with a different part of ourselves. And the very interesting effect of that was that after a rest, then when I came back into that extended position, I could see up even higher up onto the ceiling. It's like little magic tricks that he has us do. So working at the border sometimes to kind of find out, well, where is it? Where is the border? And then working at the border, you can start to create some changes in yourself. Where is the border? when you go up to it, where is it? What's the limitation? And can you work with that as well?
So as you were speaking, I was imagining you being on your belly, propped up on your elbows. Then you said you tucked your toes under as if to run. And then you lifted your head as if to look at the ceiling and maybe even moving your eyes to look at the ceiling. Mm-hmm. So that arches your back. The back of your head goes back, you're arching your back. And then he said, okay, lift your pelvis so your buttocks goes toward the ceiling behind you, which further arches your back at the other end. So now you've got your head lifted and your pelvis lifted. So those of you that are listening, you can play with this. Now, he gave the instructions, but he usually adds, you don't want to hurt yourself. So you do the movement and it feels like you're at the limit, but it's pain-free. And then you do some other variations of resting on your belly and perhaps lifting your eyes, your head a little bit, or imagining part of the movements. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you go back to that again and see how the lifting of your head and the lifting of your pelvis become automatic. The two ends of your torso, your head and your pelvis, are connected. But in the beginning, people often don't have them connected in the movement, so there's no distribution of movement and effort. So again, that's one of the aspects of a Feldenkrais lesson that is so effective, like turning your head and including your shoulders, including your spine, your pelvis. The turning goes all the way down, and then you can look behind yourself without any stretching or discomfort at all.
You're spot on with that. And it is involving these other parts and creating more integrated movement that creates, like you said, a distribution through the whole self of the movement. And it's not just isolated to particular parts. Mm-hmm. And that's huge.
Yeah, it's really huge. So recently, I had the good fortune of going on a trip to Alaska. There were about a dozen people on the boat, and daily we went on a hiking excursion off the boat. And it was so delightful to be in nature. We did not see any other people for a week. So on this particular day, we were hiking pretty much straight up the side of a mountain. And there were moments, of course, where it would level off and then we go up again. And so there were two parts, two destinations. So the first one was hiking up to a beautiful waterfall, and that was spectacular. And I was challenged, I would say. Other people were too. I could see it. So we took a vote to see if people would like to keep going, and everybody wanted to go. And I hesitated, and I said, well, I'll keep going because everybody wants to. If it had been left up to me, I probably wouldn't have gone to the next precipice to look at this beautiful lake. You know, basically so beautiful in nature, surrounded by trees and glaciers, and so spectacular. Different colors of leaves, something I've never seen before. And so there was a moment where I really hesitated to push myself. And it had to do mostly with breathing. I'm not accustomed to hiking uphill. Almost, I live by the beach. It's pretty flat around here. I'm so glad that I did. And I talked to myself while I was doing the hiking. And I said, just breathe out gently all the way. Take small steps. There's no hurry. So I used my Feldenkrais training to navigate the challenge. And I made it all the way up there, and I was fine. And the coming down is so easy. So I pushed myself happily after the fact. And that makes me wonder, in what ways do I limit myself? It was also a group experience, so that helps buoy the spirit, gives you courage. I didn't have any muscle soreness the next day, none. So it didn't really have to do with fitness, other than I think the fact that I'm not used to hiking up hills. So how do we apply this question? When do I stop? When do I keep going? And if I'm going to keep going, then how do I take care of myself? I find that really challenging sometimes.
It is. The border is not always clear. Sometimes it's very clear. And I think it's really cool, though, that you got in this experience, this group experience, and I guess you thought you were at the border, and you went a little bit beyond what you assumed was your limitation. You found that, wow, actually my limitation's further out. You have greater capacity, greater ability. than you had assumed you did. That's a great learning experience.
It is. It's a great learning experience. And, I remember in Feldenkrais training so many years ago, this was in the early 80s for me, we did a series with Dr. Feldenkrais, learning how to stand on our heads. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, I never did that. So in the course of doing many awareness through movement lessons, I learned how to stand on my head, and it was as easy as anything. It was as easy as standing on my feet. I could bring my legs straight up over the top of me, lengthened, and it felt fabulous. And at that moment, I remember the same experience. Wow, I can do this so easily, and I didn't think I could. What else am I preventing myself from doing?
Wow, that's cool. That is so cool. I want to share an experience of going beyond the border and having it not be a good experience for myself. In the spring, I was building a fence alongside of our house. So I built the fence and an entryway. And I'd built a gate, and I had two things left to finish: to hang the gate and to take down a 10-foot section of chain link fence. Because at the end of the day, been working pretty hard, and I was just determined. I was going to hang that gate, and I was going to take down a 10-foot section of chain link fence. Done with that side of the yard. And part of me knew I was pushing too much, but I was like, the determination to have that completion was overriding that good sense. And so I did it. I hung the gate, took down this section of chain link fence, and the next day I paid for it. I was so tired. I was so fatigued that I couldn't do anything. So I lost a day of work in that way. Now, if I'd stopped and just gave myself a rest and gone in and done those two things the next day, I would have had energy, would have done them, would have had that great sense of completion, and I would have had energy for the rest of the day. So there's times when you go beyond the border and it doesn't serve us. But there was a good hallmark, which I shared with all my students in my classes that week. It's like, okay, even Feldenkrais practitioners make mistakes and go beyond the border and do too much. And there are consequences to that. So it's like really recognizing, sensing, what is the border? When are you doing too much? What's the difference between knowing you're doing too much and then having an experience like you had of going beyond the border a little bit and finding out, wow, I have greater capacity than I realized?
These, I think, are useful examples, and I'm sure our listeners are coming up with their own. And, I want to add, it's like there's always a possibility of reframing. So you got all of your work done, and the next day you couldn't have worked, but you took a rest day. So sometimes we may have to go beyond and take a rest day. I know some people, they work really hard for a day, like they see 8 to 10 clients in a day, and they know the next day they're going to have to take the day off and rest, but they would rather do all the work in one day and take the next day off. I prefer to work less each day and distribute the work over the week with my clients as well. But people are different. Sometimes people like the pushing, and then they have to rest. But I want to also ask the question, is like, what is habitual for us? Because if we're pushers, we're always going beyond and testing the limit, then that's a certain way of living that can, not necessarily, but it can create dysregulation, I think. It certainly does in me. If I push, I get dysregulated, kind of wound up, and it's hard to de-accelerate, to just downshift. It becomes more difficult to sleep and to feel at ease. How about you?
Yeah. Well, I used to be a pusher. I used to push myself all the time, and I pushed myself with caffeine and trying to stay up late and all that. And it really didn't serve me. It was a habit. Like you said, it's just a habit of doing that, a habit of trying to prove myself and accomplish things. And in the end, it didn't really work that well. But after becoming a Feldenkrais practitioner, I let go of a lot of that stuff. And I've learned to pace myself, usually, and pace my work. Mm-hmm. And I'm much more successful, and I'm much more accomplished at getting the things done that I want to do. And I'm like you. When I work, I prefer to do maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 lessons in a day And that's enough. And I always take a rest during the day. And these people who do 8, 9, 10 lessons in a day, I couldn't do that. That'd be too much for me. I like a more even distribution of work throughout my week. And then the weekends are for doing, other kinds of things that refresh my brain and nervous system in a way that is not like what I do during the week.
So it takes some self-discipline to create the inquiry about what we're talking about. It's like to learn to set up your life, your day, your half day, whatever it is, as your own laboratory for self-examination and self-observation. That's how we learn. Otherwise, we continue to repeat habits without that kind of examination and to see how do we actually thrive. And so understanding this self-regulation, sometimes discipline, knowing when to say yes or no to ourselves, to other people, is a tremendous benefit.
Yeah. And we're going to do it. We're going to make mistakes along the way. Sometimes we go and we do too much, like in my example. Other times we do more than we realize we can, and you have a good experience like you did. And then other times, like in a lot of Feldenkrais lessons, we work just within the range of comfort, what's easy, but we make explorations out of it. We try different variations, different ways of organizing ourselves. And through that, we learn. We improve our capacity. On the border, the limitations expand outward. We develop our capacity that way. So it's not like clearly defined rules around this, but it is an exploration. It's an exploration, and it's a mindset of recognizing our limitations and then when to push them, when to work within them, and all this kind of things, different ways of approaching it.
In my practice, I've worked with several very high-level athletes, baseball players, basketball, ice skater, many very high level. And they have found that by doing the slow, gentle work, that when they go and they have to perform, they have to push, that they can do more. So the transfer of the benefit of the distribution of effort goes into maximum capacity. And without practicing that, without experimenting, without the self-observation, they wouldn't know that, because that's not the tendency in athletics, to do such small, gentle reprogramming of the nervous system. So that's very, very gratifying to see. And I think so often they're really surprised that it works that way. It also helps with the recovery. So, when you were talking about overworking with your fence, it's like you knew how to recover the following day. And that's key to self-care.
So I'm wondering, Donna, if maybe you could guide us through a simple exploration where we maybe discover a border and a movement in some way and maybe play with that and find out what happens.
Okay, well, I worked recently with a woman who had a neck surgery, a severe injury. Her pain was prolonged, according to the medical people that were taking care of her. So she was doing physical therapy to help strengthen and recover the use of her neck. So I asked her to demonstrate to me what she was doing. And now I don't want you to do this if you're listening. Just imagine it, because it can cause pain. So she was turning her head as far as she could to look to the right and then to the left. So don't do that. Just think about it. To the point where she was stretching the muscles. And she was also tilting her head, taking one ear towards, say, the right ear toward the right shoulder and the left ear toward the left shoulder, to the point that she was stretching the other side. And the same thing, looking up and looking down, stretching the front of her neck and the back of her neck. And then afterwards, I said, how do you feel? And she said, my neck hurts. And I said, well, let's find an alternative way to do that. So, for example, you can be sitting or standing and just move your eyes up as if to look at the ceiling and notice how your head moves a little bit. That's it. Just gently and come back. And now as you do that, push your belly forward and lift your chest and move your eyes up. And notice how the back of your head goes back And the front of your torso, the front of your spine lengthens into a gentle arch. But you're not finding the stretch. You're lengthening. And notice your breathing. Now, the same thing forward. So look down towards your toes. And when you look down towards your toes, let your chest soften and sink a little bit. And round your back as you look down towards your toes. And notice how the back of your neck lengthens. But the length goes all the way down to your pelvis, to your tail. And you can even tuck your tail under a little bit, rounding your back as you lower your head to look at your toes. Breathe out. That makes it even easier. Your lungs participate. Your ribs participate. One more time, look down, breathe out, look towards your toes and round your back. And when you come back to the middle, look up again. Look up with your eyes, let your head follow, and notice how your tail goes back. And it becomes even easier. And you may find that you're shifting your weight on your feet a little bit so that the back of your head goes back, your tail, and your weight may go toward your heels. So you're creating a balance in your skeleton as you're playing with the lengthening of your muscles. So now let's do that, tilting the head. So think of your right ear going toward your right shoulder. Make a small movement. Come back to the middle. And now lift your left shoulder when your right ear goes towards your right shoulder. Lift it up. And then come back to the middle and lower your left shoulder. And then repeat the movement. Tilt your right ear to your right shoulder, lowering your shoulder a little bit. You may find that your hand goes down towards your foot. Lift your left shoulder. And then when you come back to the middle, pay attention. Let that left shoulder rest completely. And now make a small tilting movement of your right ear to your right shoulder. And notice how your whole torso moves. Yeah, Al and I are playing around with the movements as I speak, and I can see how much more he's tilting, and I am too. And now let's do the left ear to the left shoulder, tiny movement first, and then come back to the middle. Lift your right shoulder as you take your left ear to your left shoulder. Notice how your right side lengthens and your left side bends. And then come back to the middle. And repeat that again and breathe out when your left ear goes toward your left shoulder, lifting your right one, bending on the left, and then come back to the middle and stand and notice how you're standing. You may even notice that your balance is improving, how you're standing or sitting on your sitting bones on your chair. And now let's do a movement of bringing your head forward, move it to the left. Your whole head's going to make a circle. That's it. And back of your head goes back. And then you bring it to the right and bring it forward. So you're making a circle with your head. And as you circle your head like this, sense your pelvis circling. So the movement is not really a movement of your head. It's a movement of your whole self. Sense how the movement of your pelvis balances the movement of your head. And then when you're ready, go the opposite direction, circling your head to the left and forward, and then to the right. Let your knees be soft. Your pelvis is moving. That's it. Gently breathing and observing yourself. And once again, bring that to a stop and notice how you're organized. What are you observing in yourself? So you may notice that your whole spine and torso feels longer, or that your head is lighter.
Definitely. My neck feels longer. My chest feels more open. My shoulders feel broader. And I feel a little taller. Yeah. So I love that example. I love the example of your client and what she was trying to do in the beginning, just by working with her neck alone, just very isolated. And in that, she ran into the borders very easily and created pain for herself. But what you did was have her really expand those borders by involving her whole self, like chest, her back, her shoulders, and her pelvis. And in doing that, then it freed her neck. I assume after this process with her, she had much better comfort in her neck and her head and much more mobility. And just like we did just now, anybody who's listening and did that process will have that same experience. So when we expand the frame like that, we include more of ourselves, and the movement is distributed through our whole self. It becomes easier, more fluid, more graceful, comfortable, and those painful spots just start to resolve and go away.
Yeah, so we learn how to distribute the effort, to spread out a movement. So our whole skeleton, our whole nervous system, all the muscles, everything, all the systems are working together harmoniously. And we found, as Dr. Feldenkrais taught, that pain reduces and even goes away when we learn how to take care of ourselves like this.
Yeah, beautiful.
There's so much more to be said about this practice of self-awareness and how do we take care of ourselves and challenge ourselves. So many aspects. Maybe we should continue this discussion in some way in the future, Al.
I think we should definitely do that. This is a very deep topic, a topic into which we can go much more deeply. So let's plan on doing that.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all for listening.
Yes, and have a great day. And Donna, I'll see you next time.
Okay, take care. See you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
If you'd like to follow up with a question, send an email to info@feldenkreisforlife.com. We would love to hear from you.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
You can find Al at achievingexcellence.com.
You can visit my site to join my classes and reach out to me for private lessons online or in my Longmont studio. You'll find my store, the Feldenkrais store, there as well. We can purchase books, audio products, and videos. Donna's website is donnaray.com.
And if you visit my website, you'll find that I'm offering individual sessions, group classes in the Feldenkrais method, mentoring groups, professional Feldenkrais training program information, and recorded lessons.
Thank you again so much for joining us. I look forward to you hearing us next week.
Bye now.
Bye.